Hi, I'm Kirika Jameson with Trimble MAPS. For those of you who may not be familiar with Trimble MAPS, we're dedicated to transforming journeys through innovative routing, scheduling, visualization, and navigation solutions. I'm happy today to be joined by John Poppe, CIO of Roehl Transport. And Roehl Transport is a top 100 trucking company here in the U.S. with over 2,100 trucks and 5,500 trailers, servicing customers in the flatbed, specialized, refrigerated, and van segments. Their motto is delivering confidence and satisfaction by providing flawless transportation services. Thanks a lot, John, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, John, maybe tell us a little bit about Roehl Transport. How did Roehl get started? How many trucks did you guys start with? Maybe a little bit about the company.
Sure. Well, I think you did a good job kind of in the introduction talking about our size and the space at which we operate. It's really one of the great Cinderella stories. When you start a business, it was started by Everett Roehl in 1962 with one single truck, and we've grown to the size we are today.
Wow, that's great. That's impressive. So, John, tell us a little bit about what do you value the most in your business today?
Well, I've had the opportunity in my career to work in a lot of different industries, but the last 8 I've spent in transportation and logistics. And when I joined Roehl, I think one thing really struck me, which was our focus on safety. As an industry, we speak about safety a lot, but from a Roehl perspective, it's just in our DNA. It's truly our cornerstone value, and it's in every single decision we make. So just that focus on safety, I think, was one thing that really struck me when I joined Roehl Transport and this industry. I think secondarily, it's just our organization's focus on innovation and technology. We're very technology driven, and we use innovation in that space every single day, whether we're creating solutions that are new to the industry or we're working with our external partners to create things. But I think those two elements ultimately came together for what we're talking about today.
That's great. Yeah, so I know you guys are heavily focused on innovation and how how is that trickling down to your drivers? How important is that innovation, navigation, guidance to your drivers in their everyday lives?
Well, I think it's critical. I mean, you think about the fact that we're currently in a situation where every single transportation organization is trying to grow their driver group, trying to retain those drivers. I think anything you can do to make their experience better in the truck, less stressful, safer, certainly supports all those key things.
How, traditionally, maybe just for the audience, traditionally, how are drivers receiving navigation? What does that experience look like for a driver getting to a location?
Well, I can definitely speak to the last 8 years. I know there's a lot more history that I probably am not going to talk about today, but certainly from my time at Roehl Transport, when I joined the organization, we already had been providing digital routes in the cab for the drivers and leveraging the Copilot product to do that. So that was, a pickup to destination route with fuel stops along the way embedded within that route, and the drivers would use that in the truck. We would also provide them, text-based instructions that we would get from our customers, and that's really has always been our challenge until now to solve. So our customers had a lot of fantastic intelligence around here is the safest, most effective way to get into or leave our organization, our facility. And we would gather that, right? Our customer service agents would be speaking to our customers, and they would get that intelligence from them, and they would enter it into our system, and we would pass that along to the driver, but it was a separate data stream essentially, right? So you had your full route that you would send them, and then we'd send along these text-based instructions. And we kind of expected the driver to transition when they got really close to a customer location. If the navigation route was a little bit different than what the customer recommended, we expected them in the cab, real time, to make that adjustment manually, right, and drive those different roads to get to the customer. So that's really I think for a lot of organizations today, that is kind of reality. That's how they're handling the routing.
Right. Okay. So in those last, critical legs of the trip, the last mile or two, the driver is looking to text-based directions, taking their eyes off the road possibly, and trying to um, compare that to what navigation is being told compared to what they're seeing on the road. It could be a challenging situation for them.
And if you think about it, that is probably the most riskiest time of their trip, right? It's typically in a more urban setting. There's a lot more traffic. There's a lot more, pedestrians. You have a lot more safety or obstacles that they have to navigate around. So you're asking them to do this, and it's probably the worst time during the trip to actually do that.
Right. It's already a high risk situation. Yeah, according to some 3PL studies, the last mile issues can make up a whopping 28% of a shipment's total cost. So, beyond just the safety issues we talked about, there are a lot of variances in that last mile that can absolutely add to that shipment cost. With that in mind, it seems like providing the driver with, say, just the shipper's address or a dot on a map maybe isn't quite enough or could be problematic for that driver.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to consider in just simply the address piece of it is there's no knowledge. You're not passing along to the driver where the entrance gate is, where the exit gate is, right? So it's one thing, right, to punch an address into your GPS system in your car, and that's a pretty nimble vehicle. And if you need to go around the block one time, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're dealing with, a full semi, right, navigation becomes very challenging, and an address is somewhat useful, but the precision that you really want to perform your work at just is not possible with just simply an address.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. With a 53-foot trailer and 80,000-pound vehicle, you don't have as many opportunities to turn around as my passenger vehicle does. So, with this last mile routing problem, obviously you hit on gates, addresses aren't always the right place. You maybe don't necessarily want to send your driver to where the employees are parking when, another mile down the road is where the driver really needs to enter the location. So, obviously it sounds like navigation, but proper navigation and guiding the drivers to the correct location, or as you mentioned, entry gate, is important. Can you explain for your point of view, how important is that? Do you have any examples of when maybe a dot on a map or the address didn't necessarily work for your drivers?
I probably have 1,000 examples of that. I mean, that's just a consistent challenge, right? The frustration of driving a vehicle with the dimensions and weight that you talked about, and then you put them in a situation where they're trying to navigate, right? And I think rather than an example, I think a more impactful way for me to explain it in terms of rail transport is simply, we try to be a destination company for drivers of all experience levels, but a large percentage of our drivers, this is their first job, first driving job, right? And with our own CDL schools that we have here at Roehl Transport, we're creating drivers. So we have a lot of drivers that are new and fairly inexperienced. And that is one element, certainly that pinpoint precision from a navigation perspective is hugely important. I think secondarily, we have a lot of non-dedicated freight, and for how that translates is a lot of the locations our drivers visit are brand new to them, and they may not ever go back there again. So you have, a lot of inexperienced drivers and a lot of new locations they're going to, and that's just a recipe for a lot of issues. So precision certainly helps reduce the safety risk, and it also de-stresses the situation, and it makes just that overall experience that driver's having each day much better.
Yeah, I can only imagine. With that in mind, let's talk about what type of technology you were able to leverage from Trimble Maps to help solve this issue, and maybe talk about the process in which you went through to obtain this technology and utilize this in your current environment.
Sure. So, like I mentioned, we're very innovative, and just because a solution isn't out there doesn't mean that we're not going to stop pushing to find a way to solve the problem at hand. And certainly from a last mile perspective, there was really no solution out there when we started tackling this problem a few years ago that really allowed a true digitization of that last mile route and the embedding of that route within the actual end-to-end route that we're sending our drivers. So certainly we were already a large Trimble product user, both in our back office and in cab. So that was a natural point for us to start collaborating, I would say, externally to solve this problem. And Trimble did a great job listening to what we were trying to accomplish and really trying to help us translate that into a set of tools that really delivered that functionality. Ultimately, where it led us down to was the capability to digitize that last mile route, mark the inbound or entry and exit gates, right, for every location, and and geofences, right, become a standard for the geofence of that location, and create a tool that would let us build all that, right? And we currently, I think, have close to 8,000 locations created in this system, along with the APIs to connect to our back office system. So this becomes one source of truth for all of our geofence and gate information and last mile information. And then that last complexity around Copilot, because you can send a route, and if you're able to embed that last mile route digitally within the end-to-end route, that's great. And if Copilot can provide that to the driver, that's one box you've checked. But the other challenge is simply if a driver goes off route, and that happens often, right? We wanted to make sure that the routing intelligence was there so that as the dynamic rerouting was happening in the truck, that Copilot could have the awareness of this last mile segment that we work so hard to preserve and share, and that it would automatically append that to any rerouting activities that were happening in the truck. So we had a lot of different technology challenges to solve, and I think we just had some really great collaboration, ultimately getting us to a final product.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were more than happy to partner with Roehl Transport on this. And, it seems like utilizing our content tools UI and the APIs we have available, you were able to create some operational consistency throughout the back office using PC Miler as your rating and mileage engine, all the way through to the in-cab routing using Copilot navigation, all operating on that same map data, the same routing algorithms, and now they also have that same last mile information. So not only, as you mentioned, are you able to create those polygonal geofences to define a location, but you're able to add commercial specific entry and exit gates, and then preferred or prescribed first and last mile routing to guide the driver safely and efficiently in and out of these facilities. So from your perspective, what have been the results? What is the feedback that you've heard from Roehl drivers in particular?
I would say that it's been overwhelmingly positive feedback. They've embraced it. I think it's always been something that was a little bit of a frustration point for them, and certainly that's why we tackled it. But just like I said, the stress of the job alone is great, and anything you can do to make that a better experience for the driver, a safer experience for the driver, we certainly want to do. And our drivers, got to the point where when we designed this solution, we intentionally had that last mile segment colored differently so that it stood out in the route. And we noticed immediately upon launching this new capability that our drivers were inspecting the route before they left. And they were looking to see if that last mile segment was there because they appreciated having that embedded within the route. And they would actually call before they even left for the pickup and said, "Hey, I don't see a last mile segment here. Can you guys put it in there?" So we knew that they really embraced it, and it's been just a real positive story. And we've seen improvements not only in just a reduction of issues on those couple last mile segments. That's been a huge thing, but just driver satisfaction. Just so much happier with the experience. And I think what we've seen as drivers have a higher level of trust and confidence in the company provided navigation system, they lean or rely less heavily on anything else they may bring into the truck to assist them. And that's really what we want to do. We want them to have just one navigation system to reference. And in order to support that, the drivers really need to trust that. And this really helped elevate that level of trust.
Yeah, I think you hit on two good points there. One being sort of driver satisfaction and retention. As we know, it's very difficult in the current climate to get drivers, retain drivers, keep them happy, keep them safe. But also was just about the trust in navigation. Many companies out there are using navigation, whether it be Copilot navigation or others, but the challenge they have is driver adoption. So it sounds like there were a couple of what we'll say are fringe benefits here, with really the key benefit being that safety aspect. So with that, I appreciate the discussion today, John, and obviously at Trimble MAPS, we appreciate the partnership, and we're very glad that this has been a positive impact on your business.
Great. Well, I enjoyed the discussion today, and we appreciate your support.
All right. Thank you.